Blessed to be part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Phone numbers 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Out to our great friend Lars Larson, the Lars Larson Show. Lars, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you today? I understand there's snow.
Yep. We've had about 3 or 4 inches here, and it's always fun to wake up on Sunday, clean off the satellite dish, and then shovel snow before you go to church.
Is it politically correct to wish for a white Christmas in Boise? Is that okay?
Maybe not in Boise, but certainly throughout the Treasure Valley. Boise is really turning into little Portland here, unfortunately.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, that is so disappointing. I mean, wait till your first cadre of Antifa shows up. You'll be in trouble.
Indeed. Lars Larson joining us, Lars Larson Show, 6 to 9 weeknights right here on KIDO Talk Radio. Lars, let's start with remembering President Bush. Your thoughts, sir?
Well, listen, President George Herbert Walker Bush served in this country's military. He did so at a time when he didn't have to. He was a kid going to a private school at Andover, and they actually encouraged the Andover students that you've got the ability to go on to get your college education, stay in school, get your education. He went down at age 18, actually might have fibbed about his age a bit, got into the military, went into the Navy, became a naval aviator, one of the most dangerous jobs, flew almost 50 combat missions. He's the last American president to have served in combat, so he's to be admired for that. He's an interesting person. Served as head of the CIA, ran for office as a Republican in Texas at a time when running for, well, I have to compare this to Oregon and Washington, not to Idaho, but running for office as a Republican in Texas back then was a bit like running for office as a Republican is in Oregon and Washington right now. It's a thankless task, and he did it anyway. And so that's to be admired. His presidency, of course, I think is most famously, remembered for his pledge, "Read my lips, no new taxes," which he broke while he was in office. And he saw that as necessary, but you don't lay down hard, specific promises unless you're going to keep them. And the voters remembered that, and they gave us Bill Clinton instead. And so that's more than a bit of a disappointment. Of course, we got the corruption of the Clinton clan, which continues to this day, unfortunately, because of what happened. So his time in office, of course, I think as a wartime president, he during a conflict that was settled very quickly, and he did not remove Saddam Hussein at the time, which many people criticized. But you'll remember that Saddam Hussein was, while a bad guy, was a stabilizing force in that region. And the region has been unstable ever since. So it's hard to say what the right decision was, whether his son's removal of Saddam Hussein was the right thing or not. I thought at the time we in the second Gulf War that we went to war for the right reasons. There were other people who said he did it to get even for his dad. I never believed that. But I think George Herbert Walker Bush is to be admired for his military service. His presidency, was not as impressive. I have to be honest, but I thought that he was a good husband and a good father, and that he served his country in so many different ways, both in the military, in the Congress, and of course at the CIA, and then as the finest president of the last century, Ronald Reagan's vice president, and so that's sorry to see him go. And the only thing I loved the fact that he still did things like the tandem parachute jumps late into life. That was great. That the man apparently had no fear. His friendship with the Clintons was less impressive as far as I'm concerned. I know that he thought he got a lot done by being personal buddies with Bill Clinton. I thought the fact that George Herbert Walker Bush was such a moral man. I mean, other than breaking that the promise that he made on taxes, I thought that he was a man who cared very much about doing the right thing, and to hook up with a guy who's clearly kind of a snake and threw him his wife simply because they could get a lot done from a charity standpoint was, I think, a bad call. But But his military service, I think, more than anything else, really impressed me. And so I have to leave it at that.
I would agree with you, but, his embracing the Clintons and Barbara Bush declaring that Bill Clinton was like a son to them, and what Bill Clinton did to Poppy Bush in the campaigns. And President Bush was always more comfortable, it seemed, with the Clintons than he was the conservative base of the party.
Yeah, and one of the concerns I've got, if you want to drill into that, is that I think that both George Herbert Walker Bush was a globalist, and I think that Bill Clinton was a globalist, and I think that's not good for the United States. I don't mind that the rest of the world very much benefits from what the United States does to serve its own interests, that is, to preserve our own security. But I think globalists go beyond that. They want a kind of a world where you don't have as many borders, and if you start to lose borders, then you start to lose sovereignty. And I think that there's something special about the fact that the United States maintains its sovereignty. You can see the troubles in Europe right now because you no longer seemingly have borders. And then you see the effect that it has on your own population when you begin to view the world as one giant marketplace, and the borders of the United States are to be, I guess, taken advantage of by anybody and everybody. I didn't like that part of it, and I think the Clintons were a big part of that because they saw the personal, financial, and political advantage to themselves of doing that, and they're still working it right now, and they're not doing the United States any good. Although it is my most fervent desire that Hillary Clinton does run for president in 2020 because I think it'll be the best thing that happened to conservatives in this country if Hillary Clinton gets the nomination somehow.
That might be a challenge considering you have these young new Democratic stars, whether it's Senator Harris, Senator Booker, the return of Bernie Sanders. It would be
Beto, you haven't put in Skateboard Kid yet.
Well, and the funny thing is, Rahm Emanuel called him a loser last week, which was interesting. But you bring up a point. We have all these new stars, and Lars, as you've documented, Hillary Clinton, she jerry-rigged the process, and she still barely beat flawed Bernie Sanders. I mean, if she would have to compete openly and honestly, what chance do you give her?
I think Bernie Sanders would have had a legitimate shot. He was an amazing candidate. I don't say he's an amazing politician. I don't like his positions on anything, including health care, including taxes, and I don't agree with any of that. But he's an amazing candidate. He produced amazing results. The idea of getting 30 million people to send you $30 each and say I'm going to run what amounts to a grassroots candidate, not financed by a few very large donors, that's actually a good thing for America. I would like to see Republicans do the same kind of thing, just without the crazy politics of Bernie. I mean, Medicaid for all or Medicare for all is a bankrupting proposition for the United States. But Ocasio-Cortez, who's not going to run for president, but you're right that many of the other superstars of the Democrat Party have ideas that are just as crazy. And that's, well, it's good for us because I don't think America is going to embrace that nonsense. Let's hope.
Well, now that we have Thanksgiving over, the midterms are over, we're getting back to this lame duck session of Congress. Of course, everybody yapping about Mueller and what he's going to do. Your thoughts on the final push until the end of the year, what we'll see out of Washington?
I think we're going to see nothing. I really do. I agree with I had Louis Gohmert on from Texas the other night, and he said, look, as far as I'm concerned, work them right up to the holiday. Instead, they're probably going to head home at the end of the week, and they will have headed home without funding a wall. The president will be confronted with the choice of signing a too big budget bill without wall funding or without much. I think there might be a $1.6 billion in there, but he really needs $5 billion to get a legitimate start on that wall. And Americans embrace the idea. And I think once it's up, we'll embrace it even more. We'll look back on it and say, this is what we should have done a long time ago. And they'd be right in saying that. And if we can't get funding for a wall after seeing what was and still is happening south of the border in Tijuana, you look at what's going on there. Criminals who've come north intending to simply walk across or climb across our border and to heck with our laws, and the kind of damage that they've done to the point where even Tijuana, a city that is infamous for an anything-goes kind of approach to things, Tijuana says that this is a bad group of people, and we want them out of here. And they've left behind, all kinds of trash. They've cost that city a lot of money. Can you imagine what they had in mind coming into our country? And yet, if we can't get funding for a wall with that kind of most recent example right at this point, then I don't know if we'll ever get it. And I like the fact that the president has kept the military down there, that he says they have lots of concertina wire, and that'll do some good. But we also have a record number of people who are trying to come into our country right now. And that's just, we can't let it happen. If we do, Kevin, the country is in trouble, not just financially and in other ways, but from an election standpoint, we're in trouble. Because remember that an awful lot of people who came to this country before the so-called reforms of the 1960s brought about by the late Ted Kennedy, were people who wanted to come here and build something. And there's a brand new number out this morning that says foreign nationals, 63% of them in this country, are on one of our social service programs or another. 63%. Now, when you legitimately emigrate to America, one of the things they're supposed to test is, are you likely to become a public charge? And what that means is, are you likely to end up on welfare, food stamps, Section 8, Medicaid, Medicare, anything like that? And for the most part, I think people who come in who are well prepared to emigrate to America do not end up on the dole. But for some reason today, we have 63% of the foreign nationals in this country are on the dole, one way or another. Now, I know some of your audience will call you up and say, well, officially, legally, an illegal alien or even a legal alien cannot get on welfare. And that's true. The problem is the welfare agencies of a lot of states, maybe not Idaho, but a lot of other states, have found ways to dodge around that. They say, well, you're not eligible, but your American-born child or the child you claim is American-born is eligible for all these benefits, who will sign your family up for those benefits through the name of your American-born child. And so the actual number today, according to the government, 63% of foreign nationals are on welfare. And I would guess that the majority of those are illegal aliens. And they come here from societies where the government pays for or helps pay for almost all the necessities of life. If they come here with the same expectation, and I believe they do, then we're going to have to pay for that. And we're doing that at a time when our federal government is functionally bankrupt. I mean, we're still paying the bills and the wheels are still turning. But, Kevin, you and I both know that the total obligations of the federal government are over $100 trillion. And to make that personal for people listening in your audience, that includes the obligation of Social Security, which is not funded well enough. I mean, we've promised more than we have money to pay for it. We've promised federal pensions we don't have money to pay for. And when you add all those promises up and the $20 trillion in federal debt, our total obligations are over $100 trillion. Well, the total output of the whole country is $20 trillion, just over $20 trillion. So in other words, it's like somebody who's run up a visa bill that is 5 times his entire annual salary. And you say, well, just pay it with your salary. So you don't consume anything for the next 5 years, and your total salary would pay off your total debt. Most people who are 5 times their annual salary in debt would say, I'm bankrupt, except there's no way really for this government to go bankrupt. And if it does, then all the friends and family members you have who depend on Medicare, who depend on Social Security, who depend on all those other things are going to find themselves in a world of hurt. And what I'm telling you is that the Democrat Party couldn't be more excited, and the labor unions as well. They love this new crowd of illegal aliens because they view them as this is the group of people who are going to be our voters, and we will trade them. You vote for us, we will vote for the benefits for you. And it's a straight-across trade. And it's an illicit deal to say, well, if you'll vote for us, we'll make sure you get everything you need. Now, it's a bankrupting deal. And the problem is there will be no way to run away from it. What are you going to do when Social Security is broke? And they say, we can't send you a check anymore because we also promised to send this woman who came into the country illegally, or man, and paid nothing into the system at all. And that's already happening. If you come in here after the age of 70 and you stay as a resident legal alien or and become a citizen, you're eligible for all those benefits, Medicare, Social Security. So when they tell you we don't have enough money to pay the bills for our own people, remember, part of the problem is we're paying bills for other people, too.
Lars Larson, we always appreciate you, brother. Hope you have a great week. We always love listening to you tonight at 6, sir.
And I wish you well with the snow, and I'm envious. I wish we could get a white Christmas here in Portland.
Well, hopefully, again, we can hold off Boise becoming Little Portland, but we're well on our way, sir, unfortunately.
Keep those Antifa folks at the edge of town, all right?
Thank you, Lars.
Okay, or buy more pepper spray. Take care.
Take care. Okay, our great friend Lars Larson. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Blessed to be a part of your day. Hope you're having a great one. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Liberty Linda joins us now. Good morning, Liberty Linda.
Good morning, Kevin. You know, a kinder, gentler nation. That's what I liked about President Bush 41. I love that saying. I wasn't interested in politics at the time, but I've always just liked that. I thought it was just nice for our country. And I didn't even know that he had been in the service, and I didn't know that he had been shot down. That was, before I got interested in politics, Kevin. So that was very interesting to find out about him. I had no idea. And, wow, he certainly served our country well.
He did. He was a hero.
He was, and I didn't know that. I didn't get interested in government until his son. I was sick on the couch for a week, and I had nothing else to do, but I tuned into the television, and lo and behold, it was the week that Bush 43 was going through his debacle in Florida. And, I had to watch the whole thing because, well, what was I to do? I had nothing else to do.
Sure.
And I don't know if you ever saw that, but that's when I first got interested in government.
No, I was on the air there covering it, and we had live reports from Florida. I was doing a show in the middle, not in the middle of the night, but at night, and we covered that as much as we could, and it was an amazing time in history.
It was, and that's when I got interested in government, and I was for Bush 43 during that whole debacle. And, it was just amazing to watch it for that week. And
when the libs tried to steal the election.
Well, we see that quite often, don't we?
We do, but and it was broken down in an HBO series called Recount, or it was a movie. And I remember, I think it was based on the book. And it was amazing how it didn't look good. And all of a sudden, George Bush Sr.'s best friend, James Baker, came in and saved the day. And I just love stories of loyalty and friendship. They're just so inspiring.
Thanks for reminding me about that. James Baker, you're right.
The Fixer.
There's so many involved in that in Florida.
Yep.
And I was happy that Bush won because I thought that he was the person to win. And anyway, it was just amazing back then. That's when I first got interested in government and saw what was going on in our government. But I think that President Bush 41, I think he just missed Barbara. Can you imagine being married as long as they were, and you know that they loved each other so much. They were a complete set. And I think he just really missed her.
Liberty Linda, great observation. Thank you for the call.
Thank you, Kevin. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio. Let's get you to traffic and weather together. Much more coming up next. We'll hear from you, remembering President Bush, and the biggest debate of his career. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. That's 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning, Kevin.
Jeff Manasso joins us now from Fox News Radio. Good morning, Jeff.
Hey, good morning, Kevin.
What do you think of McCarthy getting it?
I think that it was probably time. You know, you follow the money. Aaron Rodgers was, $100 some odd million man, and Mike McCarthy had less than a year on his contract, and so I mean, on the financial side, that's where they're at, and I think the NFL has really figured out the Green Bay Packers under Mike McCarthy. I think he was a good coach, did a lot. And I think he was behind Curly Lambeau, he's the winningest coach, and so he's got a lot to be thankful for in his time and his run in Green Bay. But that's the sport, and I think it's time for him to move on. And he'll be fine too. He'll land on his feet. Somebody's going to snatch him up right away. He's a good coach.
Well, you wonder who will be the next Packers coach, since you're a Packers guy.
Yeah, I don't know. The search, we're actually going to be hearing from the Packers front office today, this afternoon, and so I think the search is on. We've got an interim guy from the offensive line who's been around for a long time, who's going to be taking it for a while, but the search will go on, and hopefully they'll get somebody good.
Well, speaking of looking for something good, Ford is in the news, and it's not good.
Well, yeah, so there's been a problem at Chicago's assembly plant. That's where they make the Ford Explorer, and so they're out with this recall, and they're notifying owners today of 2018 Explorer SUVs equipped with 2.3 or 3.5 liter EcoBoost engines produced at the plant here in Chicago that have misassembled fuel pressure sensors that could result in a fuel tank leak and obviously increasing fire risks. Though this recall it only affects 160 units. So as they were going through assembly, there was a problem as they assembled these fuel pressure sensors on 160 units, and they're out there across the country. And so they want them back, and there's going to be a free fix as soon as these people get those things in.
What, if any, impact do recalls have on automobile makers? Remember, Toyota recovered from a pretty significant one a few years ago.
It all depends on what the recall is, and whether or not it was like a Takata type recall where obviously there was corruption and there were a lot of dishonesty surrounding that recall. Recalls inherently are good, though. They're a good thing, and most cars will be recalled at one point or another because of a malfunction, and a broken latch or something that becomes a problem that could be worse if left unfixed. And so it's a good thing that we see recalls, and it's really easy to check out and find out if your car is in a recall if you don't pay attention to the news all that much. It's safercars.gov. That's the government website, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and they'll tell you whether or not your car. I mean, Ford right now has 4 recalls: the Ford Expedition, the Lincoln Navigator, being recalled over a bracket that's not properly put into one of the back seats, and that could be an issue. The Lincoln Nautilus, about 270 of those are being recalled over airbag modules with improperly formed injection molded plastic covers. The Ford F-Series Super Duty truck is being recalled to a transmission casing. So these are all problems that are very fixable. And once they find them, particularly the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, when they see these things, sometimes in many cases they'll force the manufacturer to do a recall. So you've got the feds looking over it and kind of watching and to making sure that things are in the up and up, and when manufacturers aren't necessarily as willing to come and do a massive, very expensive recall like we saw over the Takata thing, the feds jump in and force their hand. But recalls are actually a good thing.
Jeff Manasso, we always appreciate you, brother. That website one more time?
It's safercars.gov.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Tea Party Bob joins us now on KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller. Tea Party Bob, the publisher of the GemStatePatriot.com, and quite a few people came up to me Friday night, Idaho Chooses Life, IdahoChoosesLife.org, the big Christmas banquet and at Eagle Christian Church. I want to thank everybody there for hosting us once again, and you had quite a crowd around you.
Oh, Mr. Miller, you shamed me there. I didn't really need all of that attention. You know that.
They kept asking me where you were, and I go, there he is. There he is. There's that guy. Go get him.
Should have told him I was in the men's room.
Well,
You know, I just have a few words this morning for my good friends Max and Tom, who took the time to say some unkind things about our 43rd president. You know, George W. Bush distinguished himself in his military service to his country and also took on a very difficult task of running this country. And those two things in and of themselves deserve enormous respect from all Americans. There are plenty of bad things we can say about past presidents, and not all of them did the right things. I mean, just look at Obama and Clinton. We should at least be able to give the proper respect to these men, that they were elected by a majority of the Electoral College and served the American people. You know, this in and of itself gives them a prominent place in American history. And I, for one, do not appreciate people tearing them down in the days before they're laid to rest, as I find this most disrespectful. I find, you know, I wasn't a big fan of President Bush, and he may have been a globalist and many other things that people didn't like, but he served his country honorably, and he was our president. This man deserves a certain amount of respect and gratitude, regardless of what you thought of his policies. So, Tom and Max, before you start criticizing others, take a good look in your own backyard, because I think your comments were not only rude and crass, but totally unnecessary. You may be entitled to your opinion, but at least, if nothing else, have some respect for the dead. Thank you very much, Kevin.
thank you, Tea Party Bob. We appreciate you. And another person who was at the Idaho Chooses Life Christmas banquet, pro-life, gave me a big hug Friday night. Good morning.
Well, maybe I should have got in there before Tea Party Bob, because I'm pretty critical of the Bushes, but I'm just going to mention three things about George H.W. Bush. He was knighted in 1993, as Reagan was, and the U.S. president shouldn't allow themselves to be knighted by the Queen of England. And the Bushes were really pro-choice. Barbara Bush said that they were always pro-choice, but they had to be pro-life for the Republican ticket. And also, George H.W. Bush, he married his neighbors back at Kennebunkport. They were female lesbians, and so that shows something about the Bush family that people don't think about, regardless of politics and morals.
Can't you honor the service of President Bush when you disagree with him?
I totally honor the presidency of the United States, but a nation falls apart, a civilization falls apart when you honor people that are not upholding Christianity in the right way and Christian morals. And so we need to vote for people. And hey, President Trump he's not morally right either, lots of ways. And so we need to really get our heads on straight when we're talking about morals, because that leads to political philosophy. So that's my comment. But I like the Bush people. I mean they inherited that attitude. I think it was H.W.'s father or grandfather. He was the treasurer for Planned Parenthood, for the founding of Planned Parenthood. And so, they're not really my kind of people. So anyway, that's all I've got to say about this.
Well, we appreciate that. It was great sharing some time with you and on Friday night with all those people that love life, and David Ripley's work continues, and all those people at Idaho Chooses Life.
Yes, and that's some of the nicest people in our whole valley that come to that dinner. And I
agree.
And, well, God bless you, and thanks for doing your program like you do.
Well, thanks for the hug.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up next, we'll have the big President Bush, Dan Rather debate. If you don't know about it, it's really what helped propel him to the White House in 1988. But a few thoughts. Right now, President Bush's body is being taken from Houston, from the funeral home, right now to Air Force One, and there's a big procession. And then President Bush will get on Air Force One, will fly to the Capitol, where they'll have his body will be put in state, lay in rest at the beautiful Capitol Rotunda. And if I could, let me just describe what that will be like. For most of us, won't get the opportunity to go to the beautiful Rotunda. Maybe we'll see it on the Discovery Channel or what have you. And for me, covering the death, the funeral of Ronald Reagan, the most significant president in our lifetime, it was something that was simply amazing, where you had people on the streets, and as Reagan's body was transferred from California, just like President Bush's body, to the beautiful Rotunda, and I saw the lines and the great admiration, yet coupled with sadness, as people looked at the hearse, looked at Nancy, looked at the kids, and the lines that went from in and outside Washington, several hours to get in. You just had a feeling that you really couldn't articulate. And then, as in this feeling of vulnerability, there was a short flyby in salute of President Reagan. And you could hear the jets flying so low, and it just gave you a symbol of American optimism and American power at that time. And I wrote about this at the time, and I broadcast my show from D.C. at the time, going into the Rotunda, and you never know who you're going to see there if you're credentialed media, which most of us aren't. But I used that opportunity to just sit there and take a look, running into Tom DeLay in the hallway, at the time the House Majority Whip, one of the most powerful people in Congress. And in that time, and we'll see this again with President Bush, we're all Americans. We all voted for these folks. And President Bush, that was the first person I voted for in a presidential election. And I can remember 1992 with Clinton and Dan Rather going crazy. But the significance of remembering a life is that life and living are more about giving than the issues we disagree upon. Whether you like President Bush or not, whether you agree with him on a lot of issues, which most of us don't agree with, he loved his family. And maybe the Bushes didn't have the same values as others, but his family loved him. And you take a look at a guy who, as Lars Larson said, didn't have to go to war, but did. Almost was killed, shot down, and came back to his beautiful wife. They had children. They lived the American dream personified. And one thing I will say is what you'll see on the network broadcast is you will see lines of people. You'll have the service members guarding the casket. People famous and infamous and not famous will be walking through. And above the Capitol Rotunda, you will see the images, kind of like at the Vatican or St. Peter's Basilica, where you have, the paintings of Michelangelo. You'll have the heroes of our great republic symbolically staring down at President Bush, just like they did for President Reagan. And just the sentimentality, the symbolism of the moment in our nation's most sacred place, the Capitol Rotunda. Here you have 3 or 4 days ago, a living, breathing person now being remembered and almost being welcomed into the pantheon, if you will. And again, people say, well, Bush did this, Bush did that. But President Bush saved America. And you go back to the wishy-washiness of Congress at the time when Saddam Hussein was running wild. You go back to the international coalition that he built. And I will remember George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, as a hero. And certainly what he meant to his son. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Let's examine that a little bit more. Maybe you disagree with me, but again, people stopping on the road to honor President Bush. I think that's uniquely American, that's uniquely Western, and that's something that we should appreciate. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you, Rehemiah. More of your phone calls. But first, quickly, a little fire in the brimstone.
With you, Dan. This is not a great night because I want to talk about why I want to be president, why those 41% of the people are supporting me.
And Mr.
I
Vice
don't
President,
think it's
these
fair
questions
to
are
judge a whole career. It's not fair to judge my whole career by a rehash on Iran. How would you like it if I judged your career by those 7 minutes when you walked off the set in New York?
Well,
now, would you like that?
Mr.
I
Vice
have respect
President,
for you, but I don't have respect for what you're doing here tonight.
Mr. Vice President, I think you'll agree that your qualifications for president and what kind of leadership you'd bring to the country, what kind of government you'd have, what kind of people you have around him is much more important than what you just referred to. I'd be happy to.
I want to be judged on the whole record.
Well,
and you're not.
And I'm
giving me
trying
an
to set the record
opportunity.
straight.
You
Mr.
invited
Vice
me to
President.
come here to talk about, I thought, the whole record.
I want you to talk about the record. You sat in a meeting with George Shultz.
Yes.
He got apoplectic when he found out that you and the president were being party of sending missiles to the Ayatollah of Iran. Can you explain how you were supposed to be you're an anti-terrorist expert. Iran was officially a terrorist state. You went around telling...
Explain that, Dan. I wanted those
Mr. Vice President, the question is...
out of there.
But you made us hypocrites in the face of the world. How could you
bad.
sign on to such a policy?
Well,
and the question is, what does that tell us about your record?
Signed on to it. The same reason the president signed on to it. When a CIA agent is being tortured to death, maybe you err on the side of a human life. But everybody's admitted mistakes. I've admitted mistakes. And you want to dwell on them. And I want to talk about the values we believe in and the experience and the integrity that goes with all of this. And what's I'm going to do about education. And there's nothing new here. I thought this was a news program.
Well, I had hoped, Mr. Vice President, you would tell us to whom you expressed your reservations.
Yes, I did.
When you expressed them and what the reservations were.
Under oath.
What were the reservations?
Reservation about getting the control of an operation in the hands of a foreign power. Don Regan stated the other day, and I never heard a word of it on CBS, that the Vice President, in the presence of the President, spoke up about his concern about the whole cover of an operation being blown and secret in people that you're dealing with, putting their lives in jeopardy.
And you weren't concerned about sending missiles to the Ayatollah Khomeini?
Every covert action. The President has explained that. The committee looked at that. And so there's nothing new on this.
Mr. Vice President, I appreciate you joining us tonight. I appreciate the straightforward way in which you engaged in this exchange. There are clearly some unanswered questions remaining. Are you willing to go to a news conference before the Iowa caucuses, answer questions from all conferences
since March?
I gather that the answer is no. Thank you very much for being with us, Mr. Vice President. We'll be back with more.
And there we have it. What was left out on that clip was when he told Dan Rather, do you know who you're talking to have some respect for the office? Ever the fighter, George H.W. Bush. Doug in Mountain Home joins us now on KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Kevin. No, I feel the same way about the Bushes. I never did. Once you find out about him, I don't care for him, but I feel was the president, was voted in, and he's a human being, so give him respect. He passed away, so who was it you were, like I said, Kevin, I get my news here. Did somebody, I didn't catch who, somebody here lately was just bad-mouthing him?
Well, we had Max and we had Tom Munz vehemently saying that, they didn't share our opinion of George Bush.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I like what Lars Larson was saying about the socialist Democrats and Social Security and all that. Wake up, people. That's what I've been saying, and I'm on Social Security. I still work some, but, they can't. Kevin, I've been saying this, and I know you guys know it. They can't get an American vote. They got to steal it, or they have to have the felons in prison, or they have to have illegal aliens to get their votes.
Doug, great point. Got to run. Good morning, Dave. Kevin Miller wishing you good day. God bless. Keep the faith. Rehemiah, outstanding job. Rest in peace, President Bush. God bless.